Hi, everybody. We are mostly the free desktop code of conduct team. Lyude, Karol, which is me, Daniel, and Simona will be present here. Simon won't be, but I think that's fine. You probably already either know us or. Anyway, we want to talk a little bit about the work we've been doing past couple of months. Mostly we are trying to formalize and document more of our process and everything, because like 1 year ago, nothing of that really existed. The main thing which basically defines the entire code of conduct team and everything is the hosting policies, which the board of directors came up with. Then we have the code of conduct, which kind of defines how we have to behave and everything. And then we also have the policy for this conference. And yeah, so that's kind of what we've been giving to by the board. And what we basically started to work on top of that is that we want to give guidance to maintainers who might not know how to, deal with people or how to enforce things. So we've started to write down guidelines and stuff like this. And on the second link at the bottom is the processes we started to write down. It's not that much at this moment, but it's like kind of the basic things, and we kind of would like to know what everybody here is thinking, or people in the community of, what we should add and stuff like this. Yeah.
This is I'm too tall. So on all the things, there's also been a bunch of questions recently, recently this past year, because we managed to score a few high-profile enforcement actions, unfortunately. And we figured like one thing we want to talk about a bit, and like also get like feedback from the community and make sure like people understand what we're doing, and maybe more importantly what we're not doing, is kind of on what scale we're doing enforcement action. And this goes on one extreme end from the very swift decisions, which is just banning spam bots and other nonsense like that. Like Bitcoin is still a thing, and they like our CI farm. And also where we have fairly swift actions when we have complete outsiders like joining our community. We get a report from someone, oh, by the way, have you seen this, Nick? Like, here's the background. And we look into it and we kind of just recoil in horror and decide that we cannot afford under any circumstances to associate with this other community, because they're a bit too brightly burning dumpster fires. Then there's kind of the middle ground where we get a report, we start some informal chats. Maybe we do some even a formal warning as like the code of conduct team, like please keep in mind, like this is our ground rules here. Do follow them, and everything's fine. Like they get the message. They maybe adjust if anything needs to be adjusted, or they just realize, like on free desktop, this is how they expect it to behave, and like the more funny stuff they can do somewhere else. And then there's like the really drawn out, complicated cases, which I think is the major work that we're actually doing, and it occupies us. Like generally, there's like lots and lots of informal chats and like formal chats and formal warnings and all that stuff. If things just don't work out, because we're trying to like build a community, not get everyone banned, that's useless. We're trying to discuss this with other members of this project, maybe other members of outreach to their employer, and like just figure out how can we improve the situation so that good constructive communication is handling. We do eventually reach the point where being polite and just chatting just doesn't get the message across, in which case we do implement the suspension, but still with the goal that we want to get them back and like stay a part of the community and help build great things. On the third timeline, like the swift decisions for like banning spam bots and stuff is like just instant. Whoever gets to them first. The complicated cases, I've seen some as maintainer. I've seen some now as member of the code of conduct team. Those take like years. So it's not like suddenly we banned someone from one day to the other because we just felt like it. There's generally like years of background checks, formal warnings, outreach to like related people until an actual suspension is implemented.
Very well organized. So yeah, I mean, I guess one of the main things that's maybe surprising is that people somehow perceive us as some kind of like omniscient, omnipotent team who do like absolutely everything, and that, you know, everything that happens on Free Desktop is something we'll automatically deal with. But we're not that many people, and Free Desktop's extremely wide, and like, you know, I can't stay on top of like every single issue that comes in through GStreamer, as well as the graphics stuff, as well as like network manager and whatever. So there's definitely a hierarchy of, you know, ideally all of the sort of sub-communities within Free Desktop are, you know, pretty much sort of self-regulating and self-moderating, and people do good things there. And definitely looking at the maintainers as well to be trying to enforce that, which is why we put up the guidelines probably a couple of months ago, I think. We put up, you know, guidelines for like, you as a project maintainer should be doing these things to, you know, to try and keep things healthy, so you can actually have that self-regulating community rather than, you know, it's just random stuff happening and some of it's terrible, and then the external CoC people swoop in with the ban hammer. So yeah, I suppose we've got this kind of hierarchy listed of, you know, starting much more locally to the sub-project, and then, you know, if you're as a maintainer like a bit under border or not sure what to do, just reach out to us, and, you know, we can try and help you out before it, hopefully it doesn't, but, you know, before it escalates to us doing sort of more enforcement. And then, you know, on top of us, because we're just appointed people, on top of us there is the Xorg Foundation board, who are the ones that are, you know, ultimately accountable to the community because they are actually elected, and, you know, they're the ones who we're accountable as a team, I suppose. So, do you want?
Yeah. So we provide a number of services to try to basically help maintainers, you know, be able to maintain their communities. You know, obviously we have the case-by-case support by the Free Desktop Code of Conduct team where, you know, you're welcome to come to us and we can help handle a case and look into it and figure out what to do. We also actually offer training. We offer training through Otter Technology, really great company, and totally free of charge. You just have to get in contact with us and we can talk about setting up a time for you to actually do that training. We also are trying to help improve governance rules overall, because this sort of stuff isn't easy. I mean, it's not even easy for us, you know, so why would it be easy for a maintainer? And we're sort of trying to do our best to sort of help maintainers figure out what kind of project governance rules really work for their community and can help sort of keep things fair and productive. And as well, you know, maintainers may delegate enforcement to us, to a trusted community member, possibly, or directly to us. So it doesn't necessarily have to be us doing the enforcement. If you have someone who you trust and you'd rather have them do it, you know, that's perfectly fine with us.
So one thing is also like to kind of be able to do this job is a very like trusted possession, and obviously people asking like, are we just like power hungry people who happy to have used this trust? And so we definitely need oversight. And so this slide is a bit like about what oversight looks like in theory. And there's a few elements. One is like we do the yearly transparency report about kind of what the Free Desktop Code of Conduct team has done, and officially kind of as the team done enforcement actions, so not including the things where we work together just with maintainers and projects to help them a bit figure out what they need to do. There's a bit of question going on there where like I think it would personally be a really good thing if some of the projects, or at least the bigger ones, would also do that transparency report, where like maintainers say like, so this year we had like 2 cases where we had to chat with people and like formally give them warnings that they need to adjust their behavior because they're just derailing discussions into bike sheds and fights and not something constructive and useful. So that's the yearly report. So you have as a community a feeling of like how much is the code of conduct team actually using this power, and I guess also a bit of oversight of like when it's just very little and suddenly it's like 20 cases more, that would indicate either a problem with the community or like a problem with the code of conduct team just going bonkers or something. Then there's also like the enforcement hierarchy that Daniel mentioned, which is also like the appeal hierarchy. So like if someone of your peers says like, hey, this was not the most constructive command, and you think like this is just stupid harassment, you can go to your maintainer. Or if the maintainer does an enforcement action, you're not agreeing with that in either direction, where it was like too little, like they didn't do their job, or like they just aggressively and didn't do their job, you can escalate to Free Desktop Code of Conduct team. And if we screw up, you can like appeal to the entire board. And if the board screws up, right, you can just vote them all out and replace them with people who do more to your liking. And then also like we have a bunch of checks and policies and kind of the hosting policy, so that the code of conduct team has a chance to enforce code of conduct against members of the board, and the board has like can't just like overrule this by throwing everyone out. But fundamentally, like the board is responsible for all this, so they can just toss the entire policy, burn out the code of conduct, replace it with something totally different. So that's a bit like the final arbiter in like how the oversight and transparency and enforcement control works, at least in theory. And I guess Karol's going to talk about how it works in practice.
Yep. So there were a little bit of discussions recently about people complaining that there's too much overlap between the CoC and the board of directors. And yes, it's very unfortunate, but it's also like all volunteers. And if we don't have enough volunteers to run, for example, board elections, or we don't have enough volunteers to run the code of conduct team, then we have to make compromises. And yeah, there being an overlap is obviously not great, but because, you know, people might have conflict of interest and might not want to overrule the CoC team, or, you know, it's just makes it less effective. So if somebody of you think, yeah, okay, I want to oversee what the code of conduct team is doing, feel free to join the board. If people think that their perspective, or the perspective of the projects they are working on isn't properly representative in the code of conduct team, you are free to approach us and ask to join. You can also suggest other people who might want to volunteer on either side, or if you only want to rant or complain, then you can also just accept the situation. So, but yeah, I mean, volunteering is the way to go usually. So yeah, now we want to go to a little bit of feedback. we are totally accepting that we will make mistakes. We are not infallible, so we will screw up. So if anybody has any feedback, you can always reach out to us. It doesn't have to be here because sometimes, you don't want to discuss topics in the public, especially in this region. But you can also, ask us here, so that's totally fair. But we are very open in regards to criticism. So yeah, I mean, we are there for you. So if you are not happy with us, then that's obviously a problem. So one of the questions is also like, should we become more transparent? There are some requirements we have. So in the hosting policies, it states that we have to remain confidential. So there's some like restriction on how much transparent we can be in our yearly reports, for example. We can't go into specifics there because it has to be, confidential. But yeah, do we even have a, no, that's the last slide. Yeah, so if you have questions, you are free to ask them. Yeah.
I guess like just reiterating what Karol said, like also very much feel free to reach out through like our conduct list together jointly, individually on the hallway track. We're here to like serve the community and help make sure discussions are constructive and effective, and people like to be here and great stuff.
First of all, thank you for working on this. I'm not part of the X. I'm just a user and looker. But I'm part of some code of conduct group, and I can just maybe suggest that you could want to consider rotating the people. I mean, the people that can get in touch. For example, I see 4 of you, and there's 2 missing, if I remember correctly, that decide who is going to be in charge for, let's say, 6 months. Because when there is a report, it is very emotionally consuming because you have to hold a lot of information for yourself, and then you have to deal with situation and trying to be fair, and that is a very hard task. So be easy with yourself because mental health is important if you want to last in the long run. And the other thing is regarding to transparency, there is another thing is sometimes there is reason about protecting the people that you don't want to affect, but also liability issues that also you have to pay attention. I have been in situations where, okay, the public face that the public discussion, what everyone knows, is not exactly how it happened, or it's not the truth, and you have to keep confidentiality until everything is clarified. And that is very hard. It's a very tough job.
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, I guess the main thing with rotation is, like Karol was saying, we're not exactly drowning in people stepping up to try and help out. So, we have I suppose, an informal rotation. Internally, we we try and make sure we're not just dumping it on one particular person or whatever, but it's sort of shared out. But in terms of more external rotation, it's sort of down to bringing people in, but those people are mostly sat here, so please do that.
Yeah, maybe to add to your last point about like it's hard to explain what really happened when we have to keep confidentiality. Doing this talk here was very much motivated by some of the cases we had this year. They're kind of the community reactions were, at least in some cases, not aligned with what actually happened. So we figured we can't talk about the specifics, but we can explain how we actually do the job and like what kind of documentation we've been adding to make sure we do the job as consistently as possible, because it is an enormous amount of trust that the community puts into us. We owe that to the community to like be consistent and fair.
Could you maybe kind of go through sort of, I guess, what would be entailed in joining? And I'm not quite sure. I mean, I got a general idea, but
That's totally fine. So usually the process is you basically just reach out, ask, hey, can I step up and do this sort of thing? And what we'll do from there is we'll schedule an actual training session for you with other technology. Yeah, it's about like 2 hours. And yeah, pardon? It might be a little longer. It's been a while since I did it. So, but yeah, we schedule a training session, and then once that's through, what we do is we run a vote by the board, as per our bylaws, and I mean, usually the board is going to approve. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole process.
I guess maybe to make it less scary of like you directly join the code of conduct team and have like shoulder this responsibility for the entire team, is like any kind of job you can gradually ramp up, and so you could like maybe do the training and figure out how to do this in your project, or maybe you have experience there already how to handle that, and so it's not like a 100% experience. Like, for example, I've been as kernel maintainer subsystem right now, previously just for driver, been handling kind of code of conduct enforcement as just project leader for 10 plus years before joining here. You don't need 10 plus years, just to not scare people. But like, there's a gradual thing. We try to like mentor people and all that stuff. But if you want to join, like, just reach out and we'll get you occupied.
Yeah, and I guess just one thing I sort of want to point out as well, because you'll notice we have like 5 people in the team now, right? Which is a bit more than before. And what we found, I mean, yeah, but like what we found is that the more people you have on the team, the easier the workload is on everyone. Especially for like the reasons that were brought up before. It allows us to sort of have that informal rotation and make sure that things don't get overwhelming for anyone on the team. So.
I was just curious what your workload consists of. Is it like is it more a few major things a year, or is it like 100 small things, or both? I don't know like the scale of the free desktop project and what all happens.
This entirely depends on whatever happens. So I personally deal, I think, with most of the spam stuff, and it's mostly just, okay, you get an email, there's a spam, and then you take like 5 minutes to disable the account or something. So that happens quite a lot. But yeah, sometimes it's also like just a case and somebody says, okay, yeah, this person has this kind of harassment history and is bad person, and then we discuss the stuff, and then maybe it takes like a couple of days before we reach an agreement, but like, a couple of days in the sense of, yeah, maybe the members don't have time to discuss this, so maybe it takes a little bit of time, but yeah, then we also have like the heavy cases which require a lot of discussions, but
Yeah, I guess also coming back to the rotation point. So some of the big ones is a bit like, all right, I've really got to clear out some time, and we'll all be over the course of an entire night for a couple or a few nights a week, sort of all going back and forth and trying to figure out what to do and get everything lined up. But yeah, the big ones are, like you say, probably a couple a year or less. It is nice when people behave. But yeah, the informal rotation thing, I think, comes in more strongly with the kind of slow burners. Like there's definitely been for sure some people who have been on our radar of like, this isn't necessarily problematic, but there's a pattern happening here that we should keep an eye on. And that's not so much something where like everyone's like constantly monitoring, but there will be one person who's more involved and keeping an eye on things, and will usually sort of take the majority of that load and try to surface things a bit to the rest of us. So when something notable happens, like, hey, this is going on, and it's that one person who's taken a responsibility of keeping an eye on it and trying to figure out at what point does this need to become a real discussion, I suppose.